So I definitely wanted to do a bit of a preview for some fights that are going to be coming up this weekend. This video I'm going to be basically focusing on Vasyl Lomachenko versus Miguel Marriaga. A pretty interesting fight. Very interesting fight as far as I'm concerned. I think there's a lot of people, interestingly enough, that I think are in it, like either on one side or the other, going to too far of an extreme with regard to this fight. I see a lot of people feeling like that you know this fight isn't deserved. Miguel, like, I don't know who Miguel Mariaga is. Even though, like I've said before in some of my videos, it's very easy to find out who some of these fighters are. Even just going beyond BoxRec, just type their names into a search engine, whether it's YouTube or Dailymotion or whatever. It's very easy to find footage of who these guys are and who they fought against and how they looked in those fights. Um, Not to mention, especially because of the fact that Mariaga had two very particularly high-profile fights, and one against Nicholas Walters a couple of years ago, and then the second one very recently, just a few months ago actually, against Oscar Valdez. Um, it's kind of interesting to me though, because while I do kind of agree with the people that feel like, yes, Mariaga doesn't really deserve a title shot at the next weight class up, considering the fact that he literally just lost his last fight, which was a title shot against Oscar Valdez at 126 pounds. And interestingly enough, Oscar Valdez had actually been Vasyl Lomachenko's mandatory before Lomachenko moved up to 130 pounds. So that's just kind of some interesting food for thought, at least, the very least, in terms of like you know, what some people like to refer to as a triangle theory with regard to the way that they could potentially match up. And then of course, if you throw Walters in there, that the triangle theory matches up in more of a, I guess, of like half of a pyramid in that sense. But Mariaga, at the very least, stylistically speaking, I think can give Vasyl Lomachenko a pretty good fight. In spite of the fact that he really is a natural featherweight. I remember they even showed the fight night weight. I think it was against Valdez that he weighed 132 pounds on the night. So he's not. It's not like he's like any big featherweight necessarily. It's not like he's some guy that's like outgrowing the weight class. As far as I understand it, it's basically he was given the opportunity after there was some other offers made to some other fighters that, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, and from what I've kind of seen, read, and heard, were fairly insulting offers. I mean, if you're a world champion, if you yourself are a world champion, and another world champion is coming to you for a fight, and he's making $700,000 or $800,000, and they're offering you 100,000, if that, maybe a little bit more, but if that, frankly, it's very understandable why somebody would turn that down. Whereas with Miguel Mariaga, consider the fact that he lost his last fight, the fact that he is a very high risk, low reward opponent, the fact that he only made $40,000 against Oscar Valdez in the first place. It's doubtful that he'd probably, he'd really think twice about taking whatever money Top Rank and Lomachenko would offer to him. Considering just there's probably a good chance that it may have even been more than what he made for Oscar Valdez, and we'll probably see that as they tend to. Somebody usually reports exactly what the purses were. I always try to look out for that, but sometimes they're published and sometimes they're not. But usually for these top ranked cards, they're fairly easy to find. Dan Raphael will frequently wind up posting them, but either way, I think that Marriaga has the type of mentality, at the very least, if not the style, to give Lomachenko a run. He's the type of guy that he has that kind of Marcos Maidana-esque or like Ricardo Mayorga-esque mentality about him, where it's like he really doesn't care about your rep. He really doesn't care about the cute little movements that you're doing in order to razzle dazzle the crowd, and that kind of fools people with regard to you utilizing your natural talents. But there's a difference between talent and skill. Talent is something that you're kind of born with and kind of show off at the drop of a hat, whereas skill is something that you've crafted and honed over time, over a number of years. And while Lomachenko does have a certain degree of skill, don't get me wrong, I do think that a lot of people will mistake some of the talents that he shows off for skill, as opposed to the skills unto themselves, standing alone as they are. Um, which kind of, I guess, maybe leads me to some of the other sector of boxing fans and pundits that I kind of hear with regard to this fight that may be a bit down on this fight, is that if you thought it was cool, or like you were one of these people that were hoping for or hyping or rallying for a fight between Vasyl Lomachenko and Guillermo Rigondeaux, you should have no problem with this fight, because frankly speaking, Guillermo Rigondeaux hasn't proven anything above 122 pounds. So him actually deserving a title shot at 130 pounds, not even just 126, but 130 pounds, is unto itself not really dissimilar from where Marriaga happens to find himself, with regard to getting title shots and things of that nature. Although at the very least he's not necessarily coming off of a loss. The controversy, I guess, with Moises Flores notwithstanding. Not to mention the fact that, frankly, Rigondeaux's opponent selection for the past few years has been pretty atrocious outside of the Moises Flores fight, which again, ended under some pretty strange circumstances, and who knows if they'll ever actually wind up running that back, even though the WBA seems pretty well towards trying to get it to happen again. I was actually kind of surprised it was even happening in the first place, considering the fact that Flores is a Heyman fighter. Rigondeaux, of course, is with Rock Nation, so of course, there tends to be a bit of difficulty in actually making fights between the entities as they stand, for the most part, anyway. Not to mention, the fact that Rock Nation generally hasn't really kept most of their fighters very busy at all. That's probably why Miguel Cotto is now actually with Golden Boy for whatever remains of his career, which looks like it may wind up ending sometime soon. But I'm kind of digressing now. Basically, getting back to Vasyl Lomachenko and Miguel Marriaga. Even though, like I said, Marriaga isn't necessarily like the most deserving of this fight, I do think stylistically he can present some problems for Vasyl Lomachenko. I do think that he could actually make this a fairly close fight. Against Nicholas Walters, I actually thought he wobbled Walters several times in that fight. Walters was eventually able to drop Marriaga at one point, hit him with what I remember being a pretty clean, sharp right hand, and as Marriaga was throwing at the same time in the 10th round, Marriaga basically went down. Wasn't necessarily hurt, but it was a clean, hard shot. Got caught at the right time with the right amount of leverage, went down. That's all there is to it. But I thought the judging in that fight was way too wide for Walters. I thought, I thought that Marriaga actually made that fight very close. I thought that was basically like an 8-4 type of fight for Walters. That was pretty difficult for him, in spite of the fact that Walters actually even missed the weight. So he was definitely the bigger man going in there against Marriaga. Actually, I think Walters was like over 140 pounds on Fight Night for that fight, something of that nature. But since then, of course, Marriaga was racking up wins, racking up knockouts, all the way, knocking out a couple of prospects along the way, even all the way until he got that fight with Oscar Valdez earlier this year, which was, definitely one of the fights of the year. If that's not on your short list for fight of the year, I suggest you go back and watch that fight, because that was a very entertaining fight, a supremely entertaining fight between Valdez and Marriaga. And once again there, I thought Marriaga really got hard done by. Judges scored that fight way too wide. That was like a 7-5 or 8-4 type of fight once again. Oscar Valdez was basically just able to kind of stay, just a slight step ahead of Marriaga. Marriaga isn't necessarily the quickest guy under the sun, but he's very rugged. He has an extremely hard jab. Like, his jab lands like a power punch. He has an excellent chin. He actually has, it's almost like he just has like natural leverage in every punch that he throws. Almost like a Gennady Golovkin, where even though it's not looking like he's exerting a ton of force on every punch, there's like, you could just see the level of power that he lands with every punch. You could like see the thud. You could hear the thud. You could see like the ripple of the opponent's like entire body like get moved by by the punch. It's like these are like bone breaking type of punches that this guy's landing. Um, and of course, the way that Walters was able to kind of defeat Marriaga, and also even the way that Valdez was, to a certain degree, was the fact that they were able to kind of range him a little bit, outbox him, and kind of keep distance. And I imagine Lomachenko would probably be good to be mindful of that distance, that range, and everything. I'm sure he probably will be, as experienced as he is. I doubt that he would necessarily take Marriaga lightly, because frankly, I think if Vasyl Lomachenko takes Marriaga lightly, he's going to sleep. That's all there is to it. If he goes in there, fucking around, Marriaga can put his lights out. He absolutely can. Marriaga is the type of fighter where if he hits you, any fighter at 130 pounds below, pretty much any fighter, unless you have a straight up granite chin, you're going down, or at the very least, you're gonna feel it. Your entire world is gonna be shifting under your feet, and you better be ready to try and get your wits back about you very quickly, because he is looking for the finish as soon as he hurts you, and by and large, he's managed to get it. 21 knockouts and 25 wins. That definitely says something. Especially considering some of the guys that he's managed to score those knockouts over. So, all that said, I do favor Lomachenko to win this fight. I think kind of similar to some of the fights that I've actually previewed recently. I think that basically he'll be beating Marriaga to the punch most of the night. I think it'll be kind of on Marriaga to kind of play catch-up, to cut off the ring. Marriaga, it seems like he can't really get very good of a break, very good of a shake in front of top-ranked judges, or judges of top-ranked fights, as evidence versus Walters and versus Valdez. So I actually really wouldn't be surprised to once again see like a 7-5, 8-4 type of a fight, a very close type of a fight. Maybe Marriaga showing some of the same weaknesses in Lomachenko that Lomachenko kind of had exposed against Orlando Salido, since Marriaga stylistically does certain things somewhat similar to Salido, albeit I'd say with more power, but not quite as much craft or kind of sneakiness about it. But even though I think that there's a good possibility that the fight will be that kind of a close fight where Lomachenko has to, be more technically skillful than just showing off talent and trying to be flashy and highlight reel-esque the way that he did against guys that were just pretty much static in there, like Sosa and like Walters, like Martinez. I think that he'll wind up getting way more benefit of the doubt than he would necessarily deserve in whatever rounds may happen to be kind of close-ish rounds. And we'll wind up probably saying like a 10-2 or 11-1, like dominant, quote-unquote, decision victory for Lomachenko. But which is one of those things, just felt kind of like talking about this fight and just letting people know that, Marriaga is he's no bum, he's no chump. He's definitely one of these fighters that, if you haven't been paying close enough attention, could have possibly been overlooked. But he's one of those fighters that you overlook at your own risk, because he is a guy that could upset just about anybody at 130 and below on an even night, simply because of the particular attributes he possesses, not only physically but psychologically, the way that he fights, the way that he approaches the sport of boxing. But that's all for this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.